do if one of your collaborators is moving to another country and your PI wants to keep working with them? What about a research fellow coming in from Pakistan or someone traveling to China? How do we need to navigate these spaces, and what do we need to know as research administrators? This is a question that is coming up more and more in various capacities, and because of the increased attention lately on foreign collaborations, I wanted a refresher, and so that joyfully leads to a lot of video content as well, and so yay for education. As always, please keep in mind that any video that I create is meant to be the beginning of the conversation, not the entire conversation. So please share your wisdom in the comments. And if you're using this to get a primer on foreign involvement, then I recommend using this video to plant seeds of questions to ask your managers, check with your organizational policies and supporting systems and your lawyers. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but should be enough to get us all started. All right. There are a lot of different ways in which foreign involvement shows up in research, but let's start with what the NIH says, and let's go from there, right? So a foreign component is defined as the performance of any significant scientific element or segment of a project outside of the United States, either by the recipient or by a researcher employed by a foreign organization, whether or not grant funds are expended. Activities that would meet this definition include, but are not limited to, the involvement of human subjects or animals, extensive foreign travel by recipient project staff for the purpose of data collection, surveying, sampling, and other similar activities, or any activity of the recipient that may have an impact on U.S. foreign policy through involvement in the affairs or environment of a foreign country. Examples of other grant-related activities that may be significant are collaboration with investigators at a foreign site anticipated to result in co-authorship, use of facilities or instrumentation at a foreign site, or receipt of financial support or resources from a foreign entity. Now, according to the NIH guide memo that was issued as a reminder to the research community in 2019, if a recipient determines that a portion of the project will be conducted outside of the United States, the recipient will then need to determine if the activities are considered significant. If both criteria are met, then there is a foreign component. Okay, so they also have to be considered significant. Now, foreign travel for consultation is not typically considered a foreign component according to the NIH. However, if your organization has, your organization probably has insurance premiums, and those may change depending on how much your researchers travel to certain countries in the world. So while we are often laser focused on the NIH policies, keep in mind that there are multiple interested parties where foreign involvement is concerned, and that foreign component and foreign interference, though related, aren't the same. And we'll go into that more in a little bit more detail a little bit later. However, if it does, so let's just say that it does fit the definition of being a foreign component based on the NIH guidelines, then you must obtain prior approval from the NIH by disclosing the foreign component in your application and providing detailed information about the collaboration, including the foreign collaboration institution and the specific research activities to be conducted overseas. Now, foreign components require explicit approval before adding them to your project. Okay? Now, earlier we said how travel doesn't really usually count for a consultation. However, the NIH definition of the foreign component does state that extensive foreign travel by the recipient project staff for the purpose of data collection, surveying, sampling, or similar activities, it is a foreign component, okay? So the NIH defines the foreign component as a significant scientific element or segment of your NIH project. So extensive is not part of the project. So let's say it's not extensive travel, it's just a little bit of travel, then it doesn't count as a foreign component. But they haven't really defined extensive or significant. So typically just err on the side of disclosure, and then they'll let you know. Check with your organization. It is more likely that there's already systems and processes in place to disclose foreign travel and relationships. There's also often technological security requirements that need to be followed as well, depending on their destination. So there's just a lot of things to consider with foreign travel. So always talk to your manager first to be sure. But if the work is, let's say the travel is for work associated with your grant and it's performed on U.S. soil, but there's like a non-U.S. resource that supports travel or supports something, then it's not a foreign component, but you would share it in the other support page as a source of funding and support. So there's another way in which you'd report it. And that's sort of why the foreign component is a little complicated, is because we think of it as like one big thing where you have to report the foreign component, foreign involvement, but there's so many different types of foreign engagement that can exist. We have to think about each one individually. So when we're talking about travel specifically, is it significant? Okay, it is significant. All right, then we need to report it. Or not significant because you and your manager and anyone who needs to be involved in the compliance got together and said, okay, we've decided that this does not fit that definition. And then as long as you can demonstrate that that's how you got your answer, how you got there, it'll be fine. So once you know, so like you figured out, okay, this is a foreign component, when do you report and how do you report? So there are two different categories of foreign relationships related to NIH funding that need to be considered as to whether they meet the requirements for disclosure and then how they would be reported. So the first is the foreign component, which is defined as a significant scientific element or segment of the project being performed outside of the US, which we've already been talking about. Right, okay. The second type of foreign interactions or affiliations that need to be reported are those that don't meet the definition of foreign component. They're not a significant part of an NIH-funded project that's being performed in a foreign jurisdiction, but they are related to your research activities or your role as a research scientist, like foreign travel that's being paid for by a foreign entity. Okay, those reports are made available as part of the other support information, and they must be disclosed before a grant is awarded. And typically, it's shared annually thereafter. Okay, here's some ways in which you would typically report when you are in doubt. Always report. Always report when you're in doubt, and be sure to review the guidance provided by NIH on protecting U.S. biomedical intellectual innovation. They have a whole section on the NIH website that specifically details concerns about foreign interference that can help you dive much deeper in if you are looking for more information. So first, disclosing foreign components. You can disclose during the competitive proposal. So when you're developing the application for your competitive NIH grant proposal on Assist or on grants.gov, there is a whole section in there that is related to foreign components. You will disclose in your biosketch. You can disclose it in your biosketch. There, if you have joint publications with foreign collaborators that meet that definition, you would put that in your biosketch. If you have positions and honors that are related to a foreign entity, you would put that in there as well. There are guidelines in the biosketch section for the NIH that will tell you exactly where to put those kinds of things and what kind of foreign information needs to be in there. But that's an area in which you might disclose some of the information. The other place where you would disclose foreign involvement would be during the budget and budget justification for grant application. Significant relationships with foreign institutions, organizations, or companies where there's work that will be performed or resources that will be provided at a foreign location, and I have had many, many foreign subawards, they should be budgeted as subawards. And this will require the detailed budget, the budget justification, the scope of work, the signed letter of intent, and the same kind of thing that you would need for any other kind of subaward from the organization or company. But you may not be working with them at the subaward level. You may be working with them at the consultant or collaborator level, either paid or unpaid, where they contribute in a substantive way, in a meaningful way, to the scientific direction of the project or execution. But whether or not salaries are requested, they need to be identified on the budget and the budget justification. And then where there are questions in the application, there's a foreign component section of the grant application. In section G220 of the Assist application, where this project involves activities, resources, or extensive travel outside of the United States, or partnerships with international collaborators taking place outside the United States. They want you to list all foreign positions and scientific appointments held by principal investigator or key personnel that are relevant to the application, including affiliations with foreign entities or governments. This includes titled academic, professional, or institutional appointments or foreign talent programs, whether or not you are receiving money, and whether it's full-time, part-time, voluntary, adjunct, it doesn't really matter. You need to disclose it. Okay. If you have checked yes to question 6, then you must also include a foreign justification to explain what is the relationship and how is this being carried out. If you need more information on that, there's a link in the show notes that tells you, it sort of describes what you need to put in that information in that document. Typically, you will need to describe the special resources or characteristics of the research project that specifically outlines why we are using somebody who is from a foreign entity rather than someone from a domestic setting. So we have to make a justification to explain what made you choose this particular person. Why is this person relevant, and why is there not a domestic organization or individual being selected for this? In many cases, there is actually a completely justifiable reason, and these are just the documents that we need to include to make sure that we're showing our due diligence, because it is not unusual to get grants funded that have foreign collaborators. They just want to make sure that all of these pieces are in place. You would also disclose during the just-in-time process. So once you're at the point where your grant is being considered for funding, and if you're not familiar with the just-in-time process, you can check out the video on Manessa.com or on Manessa.tv. Typically, you'll receive a notification that says, hey, you're going to be funded, and then they're going to ask you for a lot of additional information. A high-level overview for now, though, is that the JIT process allows for certain elements of an application to be submitted a little bit later on in the application workflow. The standard just-in-time application elements include updated other support. They typically, for all key personnel, they typically want to see your IACOOK, your IRB. This is also where you will disclose your additional financial contributions from a foreign entity when you upload your other support. You'll also, so let's say, for example, that, so the just-in-time, great time. During the year, at the end of the year, you're going to give your progress report. So NIH grants require an annual research performance progress report, which is RPPR, and it is submitted through ERA Commons. And you can learn more about the RPPR process in my video outlining the action on Vanessa.tv or my blog, Vanessa.com. But these are the reminders of where you would disclose that in the RPPR. So you'd provide your updated other support for principal investigator and key personnel. You'd check yes on G9, the foreign component, and provide a list of those foreign interactions that are relevant to this grant and meet the definition of foreign component. This needs to be a restatement, as in they should already know about the foreign component. So this should not be the first time that they're hearing about it. If you are asking for approval for somebody to join your research right now, you are doing it too late. So you would have need to have reached out to them sooner. You will find, like, as you'll find that all the things that I'm saying, there's a lot of repetition. We're putting the same information in multiple places. We're putting in other support. We're putting in BioSketch. We're putting in documents. We're putting in form fields. We're putting in the budget. The reason why is that the feds are obsessed with foreign interference, like to an nth degree. Like they are insanely obsessed with it. And so they want to make sure that there are plenty of different and varying ways in which you can disclose this information so that it just puts a pin in it for RAs, reviewers, compliance officers, and everyone and their grandmother. With all of these checks and balances, if something needs to be found, somebody will find something. Okay. So let's assume that though the project has continued and begun without any foreign involvement, let's say for that, and for some reason or another, you need to add a foreign component. Okay, so we talked earlier about how you don't want to be notifying people about the foreign component in the RPPR. You need to tell them beforehand, right? So how do you tell them beforehand? Keep in mind that prior approval is always required before adding in a new foreign component. Okay, so if a recipient of an award determines that a portion of the funded project will now need to be conducted outside of the United States, then the recipient first needs to determine if the activities are considered significant, as outlined in the foreign component definition, right? If both of the criteria are met, so it is foreign and they are significant, then prior NIH approval is required before performing any such activity. What you need to do is you will likely need to let your supervisor or manager know. The request will need to be made of the NIH through your signature official, and there will likely be a lot of additional supporting documentation depending on the nature of the relationship. So for example, if it's a foreign subaward where data are being shared and there's patients involved, it will be a very different set of requirements from if someone in Japan has a device that your investigator wants to use. But there won't be much more involvement than that. Reach out to your manager, to compliance, and ultimately your program officer to figure out how to facilitate this addition. Note that there's going to be two components to adding the foreign entity. The first will be the approval process. So it's going to be you going through an entire series of getting it approved by the NIH and going through that process. And once it's done, then you'll then need to go through the process of issuing an agreement or getting into a relationship with whatever this is. So there's first the approval, but then there's the actual engagement of that foreign entity that needs to be done. Now, if an activity does not meet the definition of a foreign component because all the research is being conducted within the United States, but there is a non-U.S. resource like space or equipment or materials or funding that is supporting the research of an investigator and or a researcher being conducted in the U.S., you would report that in the other support on your grant. For example, let's say a PI of an NIH-funded grant has a collaborator outside of the U.S. who performs experiments in support of the PI's NIH-funded project. Okay, this would constitute a foreign component, regardless of whether the collaborator receives funding from the PI's grant project. Now, let's say, for example, that a PI got an award from a foreign source. So let's say it's the Spanish Institute for Transgender Studies. Okay, then and they have funding from that. That would be disclosed on the other support, not as part of a foreign component for that particular grant. Okay. So many of our faculty will not know, for example, if a visiting foreign scholar or student would be working on the research proposed until the grant is awarded. However, if you do know at the time of proposal submission that a visiting foreign scholar or student would be participating in that specific research proposal, then the scholar or student should be referenced in the budget and in the budget justification section. If there is going to be foreign support for this project, then in that case, you would name the scholar or student in the budget with no salary or benefits. And then in the budget justification, you would also indicate which foreign institution will be providing the support for the scholar or the student. Now, let's talk about additional financial conflicts of interest. So, the NIH in Notice 18 and Notice OD 18160 issued a reminder to us all to disclose financial interests, emphasizing transparency regarding funding from foreign entities. Now, federal regulations require researchers receiving public health services funding, including subawards from agencies, adopting those policies to report their relevant financial interests. Now, in compliance with those regulations, investigators are required to disclose all personal financial interests and related duties that align with their institutional responsibilities. And your organization, likely has a policy or workflow in place for this, especially during the grant submission time. To stay compliant, you will want to familiarize yourself with your organization's conflict of interest policies, including the workflow for COI disclosures, know where the information is stored, and what are your responsibilities as a research administrator throughout the submission and award process vis-a-vis financial conflict of interest. This applies to all funding scenarios, whether or not there's foreign involvement, as COI still factors into part of compliance activities. Now, if an investigator plans to hire someone from another country, your organization likely already has processes in place to handle work eligibility, taxes, and other requirements. These details will be specific to your internal policies, so I'm not going to dive into that here. However, it is important to note that some countries are classified as countries of concern, and you will likely need to reference your organization's compliance guidelines and consult resources like this NIH page here for more information. Ensure that any hiring or collaborations involving individuals from these countries are routed through your internal compliance office and legal team. This is not a decision that a research administrator will be able to make independently. Appropriate approvals and thorough vetting are absolutely critical. So definitely make sure that you go through whatever department it is that is appropriate when hiring people from foreign countries, especially the ones on the list of countries of concern, which sadly, my beloved Pakistan is one of them. Okay. Now, we talked earlier about the difference between foreign component and foreign interference. Okay, so the NIH distinguishes between legitimate foreign involvement in research and inappropriate foreign interference. Okay, so those are different things. Foreign involvement refers to transparent and properly disclosed international collaborations that comply with NIH policies, like joint research projects, co-authorship, or participation in foreign grants, provided that all affiliations and support are fully disclosed. Now, in contrast, foreign interference involves undisclosed or deceptive activities by foreign entities that undermine the integrity of NIH-funded research. This includes failure to disclose foreign support, employment, or affiliations, which leads to conflict of interest, duplicative funding, or breaches of peer review confidentiality. The NIH released a decision matrix to provide transparency about its approach to addressing potential foreign interference. And the tool is actually pretty cool. It complements its already existing resources by detailing how the NIH handles allegations of foreign interference and decides whether to request additional form from an institution. The points include that the matrix acts as a decision tree. It helps to guide institutions and individuals in adhering to the policies centered on disclosure and transparency. Most of the research community complies with these requirements. They've been in place for many, many years, and they're a routine part of doing business. And there are the number of allegations of foreign interference are decreasing. However, the NIH is constantly doing case studies that highlight problematic behaviors, and so it's just something that you want to pay attention to because you know that they are. The NIH really supports ethical international collaborations. I've worked with many, many investigators with collaborators all over the world, so there are definitely circumstances in which that happens. But I think a lot of times what happens is that things get missed through either ignorance or not being aware, or just sort of like there's just too many things going on. And so, fires happen and things get dropped. This is one of those areas where you probably just want to pay a little bit of extra attention, double check on it. Like one of the first things I did was go back and go through all of my investigators and just sort of check to see, all right, who has foreign collaborators, who are the collaborators, where are they from, and sort of just getting my ducks in a row. And a lot of them are already in the row, and that's fine. But then at least I know it and I feel better about it, right? That's the key, is like once you know that you've taken care of this, you will feel much, much better about it. And then it'll just be one thing that you don't have to deal with. The NIH constantly reiterates they really, really, really want to fund you. They just want to make sure that you are doing it in a transparent and compliant way. I definitely recommend checking out the decision matrix. I thought it was extremely useful. There are a list of a dozen or more links in the blog on Manessa.com for this that you'll want to take a look at that will help you to elucidate any one of the number of items that we've talked about in this video. Ultimately, each situation related to foreign components or foreign involvement is going to be unique, and you will want to understand the frameworks under which we need to operate as research administrators and under which your investigators each operate. Once you've worked with a group for a while, you kind of start to get an idea of who their collaborators are, what countries they come from, what work and history has been done to facilitate this research. It's helpful to be able to put together a little cheat sheet for yourself to have an understanding of this so that if you leave or need to transfer your portfolio, that you highlight this information for your coverage or your replacement. Some PIs work with people all over the world, and each time a new collaboration begins, it might be the beginning of like a 5-month conversation between them, the lawyers, the HR, and everybody, right? Others may work with the same 2 or 3 countries and universities over and over again, so your workflow will customize in accordance with that kind of relationship. But it's important then, when you take over a new portfolio, to ask your PI if they have any foreign collaborators. What are their relationship with foreign investigators? What's the plan, so to speak, so that you can advise them on the best of your ability in the context of your organization. Now, if you were a smaller biopharma without any of these infrastructural support systems in place and you are engaging in collaborative research with anyone outside of the US and you aren't sure if you have anything in place, then definitely reach out to your research administrative consultant or your lawyers so that you can let them know and fill in any compliance blanks that need to be taken care of. I hope you found this helpful with all items related to foreign interference and foreign components. Please be sure to drop a like and subscribe so that you don't miss any research administrative videos.